Hey, let's get started, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar. I am very proud to host this, and today we put together a stellar team of experts who will help us understanding and navigate a new era in gaming growth. For this webinar and a panel discussion, I would like to have it very interactive, and we put together a great list of hosts who would give us insights here. Uh, Before we kick off, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Ashwin Shekhar. I'm one of the co-founders and CRO of AVOW. AVOW is an app marketing company which focuses on mobile OEM user acquisition. Over to you, Bono.
Hey guys, so my name is Bono. So I'm currently the head of sales for Xiaomi at the US and Europe and Latin America countries. And it's good to see you guys over here. Thanks.
Adam.
Hey everyone, I'm Adam Smart. I'm the Director of Product for Gaming over at AppsFlyer. I've spent a long time in the gaming industry, showing my age here a little, something around 15 or 16 years now. I'm currently working on product strategy over at AppsFlyer, very, very focused on the whole wonderful gaming arena.
Nice. And Hannah?
Hi, I'm Hannah. As you see on the slide, I'm Senior Marketing Analyst and Tripledot. I'm currently managing our portfolio, but I worked with all our main games. And I joined this industry one day just because I'm a fan of casual games as a user.
Nice. And Vincent?
Hi everyone, I'm Vincent, CMO of 52 Entertainment. We are a global leader in the evergreen genre. It's a company of around 250 people. We have two main businesses, the bridge card game and like more traditional casual. And it's around 10 different studios. Very happy to be here.
Great. As you can see, all our panelists come from either the gaming field and the partner level. So let's get started. Um, how I'd like to organize this is to have everybody interact. We definitely put out some questions here, some to the partners like AppsFlyer and OEMs like Xiaomi. What I would also love to hear is how gaming developers, especially on the gaming side, like Vincent and Hannah, and your inputs on how what you see from the game developer perspective. So let's kick off. The first topic I would like to talk about is the current landscape. Currently, if you look at mobile gaming, it's split into the iOS section and the Android section. My first question goes out to Adam. Uh, as a product person in the MMP side, how do you see the evolvement of post IDFA and ATT tracking world, and how are game developers adapting to this, especially on the iOS side?
And I thought this was going to be an easy session. Okay. Going in for the jugular straight away. I like this. All right. So, look, I think really Scan took the entire industry by surprise. I mean, I remember it's a funny story, but I remember when I just before I started at AppsFlyer actually was when that WWDC happened, that very fateful day where they suddenly started introducing Scan and to the whole world. And I remember sort of I was quite a long way through the process with AppsFlyer at that point. So I had some of my friends at the time sort of going, "You sure this is a good idea? Like, you know what this means, right?" I think skipping forward a bit, it's actually it's kind of testament to the entire industry, you know, like the fact that we're very, very, very good at problem solving. And I'm not just talking about MMPs, I'm talking about game studios, I'm talking about advertising networks, you know, agency, everybody in this industry is so strong at coming up with different ways of doing things and getting over hurdles. So I think it was never going to be a showstopper. But I think it's also been softened over time, you know. We've had to, as an MMP, we've had to adjust. We've had to move very, very quickly in development. Luckily, we have a very substantial development resource that is very, very good and able to jump on things at a moment's notice. So we've been able to skip ahead and really sort of push forward with the development, understand what's going on. I mean, that was the biggest thing with WWDC, and that announcement was really trying to figure out what it actually meant and how you had to adapt to be able, for us to be able to support our customers, but for developers to be able to continue to function. I mean, before that point, you had all identifiers. You could basically match anything that you wanted at a user level across any game. It was, let's say, heaven. And then all of a sudden, overnight, it changed. I think the good points to this are the fact, like I said, that the industry does adapt to all of this sort of stuff. And if you see some of the more recent announcements from like Meta, TikTok, Snap, and Google, they're starting to work more with probabilistic, and it's starting to become more commonplace, and those hurdles are being overcome. But I think for probably the biggest thing to answer your initial question, the biggest thing that I can come up with there is the adaptability. I mean, like from a developer's perspective, I was in a studio at the time, and it was that race to try and figure out what it meant with lots of other game development studios, by the way. As you're not siloed, but you're all trying to figure out what it actually means and what it is that you actually need to do.
Yes, I think this is one thing about the gaming industry. Whenever there is a hurdle, people come together and they work together to solve it or work around it,
I mean,
right?
we were talking briefly before this call, and you mentioned that you're based in Berlin, and I remembered the last time I was in Berlin was actually to try and do the same for GDPR when that was brought in. So
Yes.
that it's not just scan. There's been quite a few challenges over the last few years. GDPR, CCPA. And I'm sure there's going to be a whole load of acronyms over the next few years as well that we've got to deal with, but we deal with them.
Yes. Great. Thanks for those insights. Hannah, do you have anything to add on how you guys tackle it from a game developer's perspective?
Yeah, I'm happy to. First of all, we are happy to have our MMP as our partner who solved like 95% of our problem in this field. But on our side, I think we have like two completely opposite problem because of all of privacy setting. If we already started all this iOS and scan problem, with iOS, it's problem that we see too much organic. We are absolutely sure that part of this organic actually have to be attributed to some of our partners, but to which one? Okay, and this is a mystery, and this is where we have to dig and invent something. On Android side, it's completely different world because of a lot of view for attribution, like Google engagement view type of attribution. We see quite small portion of organic, even if we are sure that part of our view for attribution on Android actually could be bleeding of organic. But which part? Like you never know exactly. Of course, we try to compare, for example, how users attributed through view-through looks compared to users attributed to click-through. For example, if ARPU is 3 times higher for them or 3 times lower, or growth rates are different. But overall, it's just a theories for now.
Yeah, I find it very fascinating that both operating systems have taken a completely different path when it comes to how they want to track and so on, right? Which is very, very unique in an industry that there is a duopoly and both take different tracks, and it's game developers and partners who need to solve it on both sides. Vincent, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, obviously, good one. Elephant in the room. But yeah, so on our side, so it's really obviously impacting our studios or publishers we have that are massive on UA or are really dependent on UA, obviously. And for those, I mean, we never have been super strong on iOS, but the problem is obviously it absolutely hindered a capability to scale that. So we essentially stayed kind of the same level than prior to all those privacy and prior to ATT. And what I see is obviously probabilistic is becoming the norm, and my views is that it's really different per network. How they treat or how their algorithm works for probabilistic. And obviously those who actually didn't do probabilistic was super, super difficult to work with them. Obviously ROAS is king, in UA. And so if my team, if we don't see any kind of paid ROAS, it's super difficult to still spend. Although those users going to fall in the wrong bucket and they are still real users generating revenue. For us, it's a huge blocker. So we had to essentially slow down or stale our iOS activity. Now I'm seeing a little bit of a resurgence. I'm a little bit more hopeful, thanks to the recent, Google announcement with their on-device measurement. Essentially, Google is now starting to do their own version of probabilistic. I'm sure everybody's aware, and I'm super bullish, super helpful. Because otherwise, it's really only a handful of network, AppLovin being the biggest, who actually can help us to scale on iOS, which obviously put us in a dependency position. And I really personally need several strong partners to help us scale iOS. I actually hope potentially OEM can become one in that regards. So that's, yeah. And when it comes to, our MMP partners,
This
of
is
course,
really
yeah,
a sales conversation then.
maybe, I don't know. Happy to hear
Bono, get
about
in there.
about the the telco roadmap in terms of helping us on iOS. And by the way, preload, on Android obviously, but has been amazing, I believe, in our industry the past 10 years, the growth there. But yeah, sticking to iOS, yeah, it is still a huge problem and headache. And now with all the fancy AI talks we're having, obviously front of that is the creative departments. But I also hope, the technology progress in that regards can potentially help us as publishers to make more sense of attribution, key factor, and all those things, which I believe still really stays in a medieval age, I think.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to dwell on this point where you talked about preloads for OEMs and so on. So, talking about that, my question to you, Bono, is can you help us talk about how OEMs are shaping out the gaming industry? What are you guys doing in terms of ensuring advertisers are able to scale and drive value for their users using OEMs?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, air high five to Vincent. Yeah, and so cool. I think the actually I would think that there's a lot of like myths where like there's a lot of like misunderstanding about this OEM advertising things, right? Because it's become like something like people start to talk about and stuff like that, right? So I think there are like a few things. First of all, is that they're just thinking like, oh, OEM ads is like intrusive, it's gonna harm the UX and stuff like that. So I think for this one, I really need to put out there is that we are the first and the most worried person when it comes down to like the ads being too intrusive, because essentially we're selling the phones, right? So I think we will be very cautious and very on top of the UX issue, right? We'll make sure that all of the ads are being shown like seamlessly, like without being like getting people feel like they're getting spam or stuff like that, right? So I think we are the doorkeeper for that, in front of everybody. And then I think so talking about, Vincent just talked about preloads, and then preload has been, part of the journey when user open up the phone, and then we're trying to make it smoothly and feel more organic. So I think that's kind of like one of the forte when it comes to OEM advertising. And the second thing is about the scalability, right? So I think I'm not sure has everybody actually put in, paying attention to all of the global shipments, right? So I think that it's huge, right? Everybody, all of the manufacturer has shipped out all of the devices every year, right? So I think Xiaomi being the world's number 3 manufacturers, second to, Samsung and Apple. So we are now having a 700 million global devices that's available in terms of inventory. And also, I think these people are having a high intended or high value users because we're leveraging first-party data on device preferences, and those data are safe. And the third thing is about like people don't really understand like how do you do targeting, right, capabilities, right? So I think that what we've been able to do is the contextual or intent-based targeting, right? So there's a lot of data points that can only be utilized and only be discovered through OEM. So essentially, it's kind of like app usages, device type, stuff like that, and also the privacy safe data. And I think that in short is that I think OEM advertisement it's very new, but also I think it's a good way for everybody to discover different land, right? There's a different channels of user acquisition, because I think over here you got the scale, you got a high intent users, the seamless, user experience, and also the brand safe environments.
Yeah, thanks for that. Because I also live and breathe OEM advertising these days. I also noticed one things which the OEMs look to solve is like quality, scale, and the ability to present ads in a non-intrusive way, right? And like Bono said, the worst thing a user wants to see is a bad ad on a phone which they own. That being said, the OEMs also are building out their own alternative app stores. They don't want to depend only on Google's Google Play Store or Apple's iOS store. With the DMA, also other app stores can start putting their apps. Can start building their stores, can start putting it on iOS, and hopefully we will see this. That being said, my question is to Adam here. How do you see the alternative app store evolving? Do you see this as a growing phenomenon across different OEMs, different iOS devices, and so on? And from an MMP point of view, how are you going to looking at it from a tracking perspective?
Yeah, I mean it's an exciting time, isn't it? Really, I think the you can't really mention third-party stores without talking about Epic and
Yeah.
what they've achieved over the last few years. I think is absolutely phenomenal. Um, for me, honestly, I think it's all symptom of an underlying problem, which is discoverability in the App Store. Like if Apple had first-rate discoverability that promoted organic traffic, even featuring now doesn't have the same impact it did 10 years ago. When I was back in gaming, it was very much you got featured and that was massive. That was a game changer for the company. Now it's okay, there's a little bump in traffic, but it's not going to change anything really. I think for me, it's the whole third party app stores and everything comes down to really changing discoverability into the commodity that is then sold by the app stores. And if anyone manages to absolutely nail discoverability, I think that will change the game completely for third party stores. So, like when we're talking about Epic, for instance, if they on PC, their store is absolutely fantastic. You get to be able to, they suggest games that you actually want to play that are actually in line with games that you've played before that you're actually interested in. If they're able to do the similar kind of thing on mobile and give that visibility to developers that may not get that discoverability otherwise, it really does sort of take us back to the days of like Flappy Birds and that kind of thing. You open the door to actually having developers being able to develop because of the love of the game, not having huge amounts of money to invest into the user acquisition to be able to make it successful in the first place. So I do think there's a incredibly interesting opportunity behind it if you can get the user base using the stores.
Yeah, that's a very good point, but it also complicates it, right? When there are so many different stores out there,
Massively.
every store is unique in its own way and its own set of
100%.
users and so
I mean,
on.
like, question for Vincent. Like, if you're running on multiple different stores and you want to run ads, how do you know which one you want to run ads to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you need tracking, right? And you tell me, but it really
No,
depends on
but
the
even
MMP.
outside of tracking, how do you choose which store you want to send the
Oh,
traffic to as default kind of thing?
well, user base depending on my tier one countries, right? Easy. So
True,
depending on the
true.
scale, right? And so you just
Yeah.
need to ask them or whatever vendors or what is their current user base in for instance in the US, right? The US
Whichever
is
one
still
has the better users effectively.
yeah. Obviously the US being the highest LTV. At the end of the day, you look at okay, who has who are the OEM, what are the alternative stores, and then you just try out and send start a campaign, right? And then hopefully you can track with your MMP, which I believe now is, correct me if I'm wrong, fairly done, right? So
Yeah. We're able to support any of the third party stores now.
Yeah, I'd love to add on that because Xiaomi also, with the Get App Store, is pushing heavily in emerging markets. And the kind of discoverability they offer to app developers like Tripledot and 52 Entertainment is huge in these markets because when you look at only the Google Play Store, it's very crowded. But Xiaomi's ability on the Get Apps to enable discoverability in a more organic fashion helps these developers get a lot of market share on this. Moving on. So we talked about discoverability, we talked about running campaigns and so on. Now my question to you, Hannah, is with high saturation in casual games genre, what KPIs matter most for you to drive sustainable growth and to ensure you take the most out of the campaigns which you run on?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I mean, on the one hand, obviously, answer to this question is ROAS is very important, growth is very important, retention is super important. But I think everybody in this room know this, and nobody will be interested if I will talk, okay, grow your ROI. So nowadays, you're right, it's too crowded to take a look on so high level metrics. So in my everyday work, I prefer to look into the metrics who form our attention, who form our ROI for users. For example, I'm looking quite often into session per users, game per user, time game per user. If it's drop or if it's grow, something go wrong or something goes maybe even too good to be true. So, and of course, let's take a look on everyday basis, what is not only retention decay, but also decay between, for example, day 1 and day 7 in our sessions per user metric. So we understand, do users actually like our game? Maybe something goes wrong, etc. But also, if we are talking about how crowded everything else, we can't ignore creative question. We produce so much creatives nowadays. I understand every studio use all their capacities. They use AI, so it's became even more testing, more hassle. So I think it's absolutely crucial to look into all these metrics, but by on creative level. For example, we all know, I hope that some creative could have amazing conversions. So some ad networks will praise this creative, put more visibility to this. But if you're looking into this, retention is crap. We can't work like this. User just churn from our game all the time. So unfortunately, with all this machine learning and algorithm optimization, we as analysts still have to look into these things, but more granular than ever. What growth rates on creative level, how this affect whole our campaign if our creative composition change. Also, if we are talking about granular level, Tripledot in majority of their games is AI. So we also looking into proportion of interstitial and rewarded ads specifically for our different networks and different source group. Is user motivated to see more rewarded ads? How we are bringing money from this? But all of this are about ad network, incent, GSPs, etc. If we are looking into pre-installs, which also became more and more crowded place nowadays, we can't use creative level metrics. And one of my favorite benchmark, even though this is high level, I realize that not everybody use this, is how many users play even one game. It could be shocking, but if you really watch into your data, then you work with OEM, any OEM, around half of the user never finish in even one game. And this is normal. We still make money and still amazing channel for us. But it's reason to concern if one game in your portfolio on the OEM is looking worse than 50% of the users playing less than one game. So this is like one benchmark which I want to highlight for the OEM.
I think this is definitely a demographic thing where more and more developers are saying, how do we keep people engaged, right? In today's age of super short formats of video consumption, also, the challenge is how do you keep someone engaged? How do you keep someone interested in a game and so on, right? That being said, Vincent, I'd also like to touch upon the creatives. Gone are the days of A/B testing when you had one or two creatives. I would now call it A to Z testing because you have so many creatives which you can generate. How do you look at this as creatives playing an important role on user acquisition and creative fatigue also with so much creatives being generated?
Yeah, huge topic, and I spent the past, I don't know, 6 to 10 months working on our creative practice. We actually doubled the team recently, and we had room to improve, let's say. So, and now we're coming to a level where I am kind of happy about our practice. But yeah, a lot of things to say. I mean, in my mind, UA is really two components. If I'm really, really brutal, is okay, your ROAS curve and what is the target ROAS you ask to networks. Second, you upload a creative. So that's the two things you do as a UA manager. And so creative production, management, testing, there's tons of things you can play around, test, and again, we're still learning every day. But obviously, you start with volume. I don't know if you guys did this correlation, but if you look at Sensor Tower, and there is a clear correlation between a game that is scaling and the volume of creatives they are uploading. And so the past 2 years, obviously with AI, is just going through the roof. So personally, and with our team, we're trying to essentially do more. So more volume of creative produced, tested to essentially have more winners. This is like a very simple, funnel.
Vincent, does that
go
move
ahead.
the bottleneck though? Because like historically, the bottleneck has always been having the designers to create the amount of creatives that you need in order to be able to change them up constantly. But now I feel that that's moved to the testing. Making sure that these creatives that you're creating,
Correct.
you're running them, you're testing them, you're seeing what works, and then you're iterating on them.
Yeah. So what you're saying is there is a ceiling to the volume you can do, and the ceiling is your UA budget. It's ridiculous to do more creative than you can test. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you need to check according to your UA spend, how much you can actually test, and then how you test them. You test them in a separate campaign, in a main campaign. Do you start with Meta, Unity, and then you move to your big ones? So yeah, and there is no right answer, and I guess it's really depending of the publisher, the genres, and essentially their share of voice, according to various networks.
But it makes the creative strategy so much more important though, right?
It's essentially what I'm trying to say, I believe. Yeah. So to answer your question, Ashwin, I believe the creative director or whoever in your team is managing creative is actually becoming more and more a key person to your success. And we know that in our business, UA is driving growth, is driving revenue by increasing your DAUs. There is no simple answer to that, but yeah, you need to spend a lot of time, strategize, share with your peers, and try as many new technologies you can to essentially improve your practice there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my question to you now, Bono, is we talked about creatives, we talked about a ton of information coming in. What are OEMs like you, which are all building their own ad networks? How are you using technology, and what are the new upcoming technology which you are bringing out to ensure that, hey, we can test? There are a lot more creatives coming in, a lot more data points coming in. How are you using all of this data and leveraging it to drive better results?
Yeah, cool. So I think there's a few things that OEM, like a lot of things could be done through OEM that maybe like a lot of people like not fully aware, right? So I think that one of the things that special about OEM is that we have this a lot of like native and special like placements. For example, we can even create a folder for games. So there's a game folder or like non-gaming folders, right? So those placements are specially created for this preload, products, right? So I think that's kind of like something apart from the icons, right? So there's a lot of things that are like natively built in, like for example, a lock screen, right? But there's a lot of different things that can be used for as promotions, and that's the first. And second thing I'll be like talking about would be, you know, more like the contextual timings and placement, right? So you can even target, you can like, this is a strategy that we've been using all the time, right? So like, there's a lot of time when people, they download the app, but they don't really open it right off the bat, right? So at this point, you can leverage a push notification to have them open up the app. So this is what we're talking about, this contextual timing and placement, right? So that things can only be done with OEM, right? And then the push will be system level, so that's non-skippable. So like a lot of push like nowadays will be leveraged, you know, from the app, stuff like that, but then we can do the system level of push. And the third thing is about, you know, like there's a lot of OEM specific data signals and, you know, data points. For example, there's a battery status with the storage status. You can choose to promote a lightweighted games on, you know, different markets to kind of like cater to different devices usage in different markets. And then we'll highly suggest that you can just work with us in earlier times, do some workshop, and to better align with the OS updates. And that's kind of like the first layer, right? So second layer, I think will be quite exciting because big news is that I'm actually just moved to Europe. So I'm based in Spain, Madrid right now. So we actually have like a few things that's rolling out globally a couple of months ago. And I think it's a good idea to kind of like introduce the European market this time around. So the way we see the OEM store as the center of distributions, right? So with the store being the center, we have the different solutions for both IAA and IAP. So first, for IAP, we are rolling out this Mi payment solutions. So this is Xiaomi payment solutions. And then I think the good things about that, how can we further benefit our developers, right? So we're happy to offer a lower cut than our peers in the market. Say they do the 30% cut, right? We can do like, say like 15, like even further, right? So that's like discussable. This is how we try to create options. We want to be more open about everything, all of the possibilities, right? So I think, so thinking about 15, so that's 15% of the margin, which is huge, right? And on top of that, just thinking about the scale, right? You know, the third, you know, smartphone manufacturer. So the size can be, you know, quite exciting. And also I think we're being able to do what, you know, OS level insight for just a targeted promotions, like push or stuff like that. That's like something we can do. And also the second things for IAA, we are rolling out this Columbus SDK. So SDK, the way you see it is that I think there is we're trying to create this app-loving situations over here where we understand like how much you promote with us and how much you make money with us, right? So we are being able to like make sure not like completely, but we're trying to make sure like everybody's not losing money. There's a profit to be made. So I think that's kind of like our SDK. There's something can be done with this. And also the third thing is that we are rolling out the smart bidding features, right? So the way you see that will be like, we are trying to monetize against the ROAS, right? So we're not like fully over there yet, but then we have introduced in this new bidding system that being able to like optimize against the in-app events. So that's kind of like the tour box that we're offering to the app developers.
Nice. So to summarize, billing, monetization, and smart bidding is what you're looking at in building.
Right.
Moving on, my question to you, Adam, is we see companies building, especially gaming companies, building strategies for different markets, for global markets, and tailoring strategies for LATAM, tailoring strategies for Southeast Asia, APAC, and so on. Given you are driving product strategy for an MMP, can you give me from a bird's eye view on how do you see game developers building out strategies for different markets? Do you see them go to using one strategy, or is it a multiple different touch points which they use in terms of building strategies?
I think it's a it's a much bigger thing. Predominantly everyone was focused on US market because, as Vincent said earlier, it was the highest LTV, so therefore it's the most lucrative market. I think now, as the competition has grown and grown and grown in that market, it may be the most lucrative market, but if you can only get a tiny slice of the pie, then it makes it less interesting, I guess. And also when you start to look at the sort of, we did some analysis recently of the sort of top 100 gaming apps, and the amount of those that are new companies was incredibly low. So it's a lot of the time now, the new companies have a great challenge in being able to break into a genre, unless it's something completely different. And normally it's been big companies that are releasing a new game that's been successful and broke into the top 100. So it's very rare that you sort of get a completely new one. So I think it has become more commonplace to look at other geos and to look at how they perform and what kind of genres are interesting for those other countries. And also the localization aspect is a massive part. I mean, you look at the size of the Chinese market in comparison to the size of the US market, they're very similar now. But
Yeah.
you have to be able to build for the Chinese market, which is very different for a Western company.
Great. Yeah, it's truly said that while US is the most profitable market, you cannot depend only on the US and you need to spread your wings, right? So now I'd love to hear from you, Hannah, because Adam gave us a very bird's eye view. I would like to hear from you and from a developer perspective and from a user acquisition perspective. How do you look at localization in different markets? How do you prioritize from your side? Hey, which is the market we want to enter, and how do we tackle these markets?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for your question. On the one hand, absolutely agree with Adam. Localization is a key, but if we are talking about prioritization, it's always a question where we have to give our resources. And for example, I manage a car portfolio, so obviously examples will be from here. Solitaire, like majority of population of the world, or at least of Western world, perfectly understand how to play solitaire. It's self-explanatory. But if a company launch Jinrami, where we have to explain a user how to play, where we have to give them a tutorial, even if Jinrami volume on the market obviously lower than solitaire, we have to relocate our resources to localization of Jinrami for the different market. Just because like user who not native English speaker and not live in Germany, there everybody speak English, have tutorial in their own languages. And in the same time, if we are talking about resources and localization, if we localize our creatives, that thanks to AI, it's much easier now and much less resources. In this case, I would advise to recommend on the size on the market, not only on LTV value. For example, LATAM is a great example. First of all, not high level of English speaker, at the same time, huge market that we could use in user acquisition. And like also, I know if I localize creative to Germany, it won't give me a huge impact because it's also people who quite often speak English as a second language. If I localize this for Brazil, huge impact.
Yeah, makes sense. Given this localization topic, I remember once when there was this particular betting company which was doing social casino wanted to enter India as a market, and then they launched their poker app, but it was not scaling. But then they rebranded it to a more localized Indian version of poker, and it just went through the roof. So this is why I think localization is very important, especially for markets like China. Without localization, you will never be able to crack it. And like Adam said, these markets are as big in terms of user base and growing in terms of revenue when you look at even tier one markets like US. Great. So moving on, Vincent, my question to you, because you are the CMO, and I would love to hear from you from the challenges of a gaming studio. One thing which, as a user, we just talked about is people don't stick to a game for long. They keep moving, jumping from one game to another. How do you, as a CMO, know when it's time to move from one title to another title? And what considerations do you say, hey, go into making such decisions?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, full disclaimer, 52, is an M&A story. So we grew by acquiring external studios. So it's been kind of a year that we are working hard to essentially improve or build this muscle of launching games like on a regular basis, and test more things, new game design and things like that. But yeah, I mean, the answer is really about your expectations and how ruthless you are internally. We know a developer, a game design, they're going to love their new baby, quote unquote, or their new game. But yeah, you need to obviously make those decisions to kill a game and not let it, kind of damage your P&L every month, because it's like, you didn't have not the courage, but essentially the ruthless to just kill it. And again, how do you decide to kill it? Well, obviously retention is king, because it obviously puts all your UA in perspective and it balances everything out. And it really depends on your expectation of what does that mean to scale the game. Do you want the first year to reach 1 million revenue or profit, depending on your size, the size of your portfolio. A 1 million game per month, it's obviously like the North Stars, but it really depends of the size and the shape of your portfolio, what your portfolio looks like and what it means to have your tier 1 games, tier 2, and then when you launch a game, how fast you want this new game to reach those tiers. And it's obviously, again, very custom. And yeah, we are working on this every day, basically.
Interesting. Adam, do you have anything to add here, especially from a MMP or product point of view, because you've been driving product growth and you
Yeah,
were also in the gaming side.
Not really closing games from an MMP perspective, but for from a product perspective, I mean, for me, it's normally a cost thing. Like if the servers and running it are costing you way more than the revenue that you're making from the game, then it's time to think about closing it. I think Vincent's spot on with the fact that you do need to think about the consequences to the rest of the brand, though. And it's, it in some cases, it could be worth continuing a specific game if it has a positive impact on the brand. Or you could potentially reactivate and cross promote a huge user base that you've already accrued in that game over a vast period of years. There's a lot of factors, especially now, especially with the sort of changes with we were talking about IDFA and all of that sort of stuff diminishing. There's a lot of different factors that you need to take into account now rather than just revenue. But I'd imagine for the most part, it comes down pretty clearly to revenue.
Makes sense. Guys, it's been 45 minutes and I think time's flying by. But before we wrap up, what I would love for you, because we have a ton of people from different segments listening into this webinar, tuning in. We will also send out the recording later on. I'd love for each of you to give any kind of practical insights, what you would see or what you would like for a user acquisition manager to give them tips or anything from your experience, just to wrap it up so that they have one key takeaway from this webinar. We start with Bono.
Yeah, sure. So I think to summarize it, right? So I think OEM advertising has been a new things, right? I think up until now, like right now, it's still something like kind of like very new to everybody, right? So I think it's like because of that, we would be more open about a lot of different, possibilities or, opportunity, right? So we are the reason why, like we're having people here on the ground is that we want to know more about, all of the, concerns or all of the, like a lot of things that coming from the local developer to see how we can do better, bring value to everybody. And then to summarize this, that I think OEM store, third-party store, I think there's a big opportunity over here, right? And there's a lot of different things that we want to be provide different options, the payments, the SDK, and everything. Yeah, and then that's it.
Great. Thanks for that viewpoint from the OEM standpoint. Hannah, do you have anything for other fellow user acquisition managers who joined today?
Yeah, and if I follow Bona response, let's say if you work with OEM, with any partners, try never have a biases and never treat OEM traffic in the same way as you treat to your ad network traffic, for example, or your DSP traffic. It's completely different type of user behavior, and you have to use completely different benchmark based only of your data from OEM traffic.
Great. Over to you, Adam.
I think my biggest one at the moment is if you're using Gen AI for ads, to really invest in a creative strategy. I think you have to understand how you're going to be using those ads. Now you're creating so many more and have so many more opportunities with it. You have to invest in how you're going to be testing those, how you're going to approach the whole massive creative that you're soon going to have, and it really how you're going to use it, how you're going to maximize that new set of creative.
Makes sense. Creatives also. And lastly, to you, Vincent.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I guess it's a wish. We discussed iOS. I still wish, iOS is a little bit easier to operate and scale. But really, we mentioned, the market is super competitive and it's becoming harder and harder for publishers, to thrive. And we operate with a lot of constraints, from all sides. I guess what I would like to see is a little bit more competition on the vendor side of things, because in front of us, we love all our partners, but we have some partners who really have a monopoly, stores, ad networks, engine, and sometimes it's super difficult to operate, within those constraints because they are not really challenged. So that will be my wish list or my Christmas list.
This is great. You're going to get flooded by people offering you their unique solutions
Well,
soon.
do you have
So
a
get
store?
ready.
Do you have a mediation, a leading mediation? Do you have not so many, actually? There's tons of vendors. I'm talking about those big topics. The
Vincent's
engine.
available on LinkedIn.
Yes. Thank you guys for everything. That being said, I'm quickly going to share my screen where you can see a new playbook which we put out on gaming. This is for all the participants. Please, if you want to download it, find it on our website, or you can download it by scanning the QR code. Once again, thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Vincent. And thank you, Bono. It was a pleasure hosting this with you. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a nice day. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Okay.